Overview of my presentation. I'm going to introduce myself, talk a little bit about who I am and what our company is and what we do. And I'm going to go over some of our core values at our studio, as well as how we use them and what we've learned so far and why you should care and what you can do. So this is the first time I've ever done a presentation about culture. I usually do presentations about live ops that are very practical and hands-on. So I'm going to try to do as much of that as possible and bring some lessons to the presentation. So, about me, I'm a director of product at Thinking Ape, and I've been making games on Facebook and mobile for about 9 years. And I've been through hit launches, long grinds, lots and lots of live ops, epic failures. I've kind of seen it all. And I now am responsible for all of the product at Thinking Ape. And so I'm also the lead designer on one of our new games that's currently in alpha. Our company is launched out of Y Combinator in 2008, and we started as a chat company and rapidly moved into games, and we've been making games for a very long time on mobile. So we're actually one of the first game companies to do in-app purchases on the platform. Kenshi Arasaki is our CEO, and we're located in Vancouver, and you can see we have a really high Glassdoor rating, and we're hiring. One of the, oh wow, that didn't export well. One of the things that we've been really focused on is our company culture. And as a result, we've actually been able to win a bunch of company culture awards. And so it's been really great for us over the last couple of years as we try to get our name out there a little bit to be recognized for some of the things that we're doing around culture. Our mission is that we build communities. And what I mean by that is we build games that allow people to have an effect on the world that they're existing in within our games. And so all of our games have highly social mechanics as well as chat. And we group people up into social units where they can affect the world around them and build communities. And we've had people getting married in our games. For example, we have 2 moderators from one of our games that got married in Las Vegas last year, which was really, really cool. And so we've had marriages and we've had divorces, and people have gotten tattoos of our games. We actually had one guy that named his daughter after one of the characters from Kingdoms at War, but he made us promise not to tell his wife that that's where he came up with the name. And so that's kind of our focus, is we try to, in everything that we do, we try to build community. So what are core values? Core values are the foundational beliefs of an organization which guide its members in how they should act internally and often how they act externally. And our philosophy at Thinking Ape is that we believe our core values are the foundation of a well-functioning team. So we hire smart people and get out of the way, but that actually only works if you give them some guidelines on how they should operate. So you kind of hear this sort of saying touted around of hire smart people and get out of the way, but it's actually not enough. You also have to give them this sort of operating system by which they can test their decisions against. So for this talk, I'm going to frame it in the context of The Score Takes Care of Itself. And this is a book that I at first did not want to read because it is written by a football coach, and I do not watch football, and I don't really watch a lot of sports, so at first I kind of rejected the idea that I would read it, but after I read it, I found it to be one of the best leadership books that I've ever read, and it's for a really simple reason. The concept of the book is that this idea of being a coach is really difficult, and the thing that a coach can't do is a coach can't actually get on the field and throw the ball for the player. They can't actually kick the ball for a player. Everything that a coach does for the team are things that they've done before the game actually starts. And so as a good leader, the things that you need to do are to give people the tools and the support and the resources and the ideas of how they should actually act in the things that they're doing. And if you can do that, then the score will essentially take care of itself. So if you can build up people around you and you can give them a good idea of how they should act, then they'll actually do a much better job than if you try to tell them exactly what to do in the moment. That never works. So core values really tell your team how to operate, and they should enshrine the foundational beliefs on what you think makes a successful team. At Thinking Ape, our core values are ownership. So we take complete ownership of our work and act in the best interest of the company. We're the type of people who care a lot. It's never not my job. And this manifests a lot of different ways. And one of the ways that I think it is really interesting is that we don't have a QA department at our company. And that's really challenging for people when they first join, because a lot of developers and designers are used to having a QA to check their work. But what we believe is that everybody should be responsible for the end product. And so engineers are responsible for their code. They're responsible for getting sign-off from the designers, and the designers are responsible for all the balance, and the artists are responsible for making sure that the art looks good. It means that sometimes we're a little bit slower to release. But we've built into our roadmap and into our scope that we're going to test things a lot internally. And what ends up happening is that after something launches, everybody on the team is actively involved in making sure that it's as successful as possible. So, it's just one example of how ownership works at our studio, but I think it's a really powerful one. That ownership is kind of the core value that everybody puts on their wall, but it isn't something that actually always manifests into the culture. The next one is best ideas win. So we want everyone involved in problem solving regardless of their position. So we frequently seek feedback from each other and our players in order to challenge our assumptions and make data-driven decisions where possible. And this is one of the core values that I think is really easy to talk about but not actually implement. And so we do this in a lot of ways. Our structure is quite flat, and that means that designers, engineers, and even artists have access to all data, and they're challenged to try to come to the table with really good ideas that are supported with facts. And it's something that I think we've all worked at studios where maybe you have like the hippo problem, where the highest person's paid opinion is the one that people go with. But we actually try to do the opposite, where we foster a lot of good conversations and try to find the best ideas from everybody. Keep growing. So we're always building and improving our skills and process. We understand that when we learn, we see exponential improvement in ourselves, our products, our company, and we're never finished learning. This one is really important, and it builds into our everything from how we approach making new games, and even into things like our compensation and our career tracks. And so everything in our studio is designed around this idea that you're going to keep growing. Even our bonus structures are actually based on your career track and how well that you're doing within the specific job function that you have. And finally, the most important one, I think, is have wonderful arguments. And this one is super powerful, and it's the one that people tend to be the most interested in. So we're comfortable thinking deeply about important issues and care enough to respectfully challenge decisions when we disagree. Mutual respect and checked egos allow for productive debate and better outcomes than we would have achieved individually. And for us, this is an ongoing process. And one great way that I see it manifest is that sometimes we are having a conversation and it gets a little bit more heated because of this core value. Because it's on the wall and everybody's internalized it. I've actually witnessed people say, like, wait, let's hold on a second. This is not a wonderful argument. Let's talk about how we got here and why it's not wonderful, and then we can go back to focusing on solving this problem. But so just the fact of having this on the wall, and even having everybody from the CEO, to the customer support believing it, it means that people have sort of the ability to, stop a conversation and say, like, hold on a second, let's figure out what we're actually talking about. It also requires that you care a lot about the people around you. And so in order to make this core value work, we use a method called the radical candor method. If you haven't seen the TED Talk or read the book about radical candor, highly, highly recommend it. The basic concept is that you need to care about somebody personally and challenge them directly in order to have wonderful arguments, in order to have good debate. If you don't challenge people directly, but you care about them personally, you end up in this sort of ruinous empathy quadrant. And we've all had that experience maybe where you're talking to somebody. The example I like to use is maybe you have a friend that's dating somebody and you don't like that person, but you don't say anything because you're trying to be nice. And then after they break up, you're like, oh, my God, I really hated that person. And they're like, why didn't anybody tell me? Why didn't you say anything? Oh, I didn't want to hurt your feelings. But it's like a much worse outcome for them. And manipulative insincerity is when you don't care about people, you're not willing to challenge directly. It's kind of where passive-aggressive behavior lives. Like, I don't care, sure, do whatever you want. And then obnoxious aggression is just basically jerks. And those are people that will challenge you directly about everything, but they don't actually care about you personally. And so A lot of people think the obnoxious jerk is the worst person, but actually the ruinous empathy is the worst person, is the worst type of behavior, because you actually care a lot about people, and it's not that difficult to challenge people directly if you have the psychological safety to do so. And so wherever possible, we like to encourage people to have radical candor. And it's something that is really easy for people to say, and then not do the care personally part. And so that's something that takes practice. So we've had examples where we've had leads in the team give somebody some feedback in a way that was inappropriate. And we had to kind of take them aside and be like, well, you didn't demonstrate to that person that you actually care personally about them in the way that you deliver that feedback. And so you need to now go and fix that by having a conversation with them about what your outcome was from that feedback. So it's really, really important that you actually care personally, and I think most people in most studios care about the people around them. And then the next piece is being able to challenge directly. And so any way that you can encourage that within your studio, I think, is going to be highly beneficial. Because you can only get to the best ideas if actually people are willing to put them out there, and people are willing to have deep conversations. If you were able to check out the presentation earlier today that a couple of our content producers did, it was about inclusive content. And that's kind of the thing that they highlighted is if you're going to do something that's challenging, you have to be able to have conversations about things that are challenging. And you can only do that if you're willing to have wonderful arguments. So another tactical piece of advice that I can give you about culture and about creating that culture within your organization is that you have to start with the interview. Every candidate should get a culture interview. And there's a couple things that you can do to make sure that it works. The most important thing that we've done is that we're willing to have false negatives in order to eliminate false positives. So what that means is if everybody can't agree on a candidate, we'd rather miss out on a good candidate than hire somebody who isn't going to be a fit. And that means that hiring can be a little bit slower for us as well, but we're really protective of our culture, and we want to make sure that we're hiring the right people who are going to fit in. And in order to make that more efficient, you should make sure that all your interviews, if possible, are standardized across individuals and teams, and as well as there should be 2 interviewers for calibration. And so we actually sometimes like to mix the technical with the culture so that you have somebody seeing both sides. And so we have 2 interviews. There's a technical culture interview and then a second technical culture interview. Scoring can really help with consistency, and so for culture, if you can come up with a set of questions that test for your core values, you can then score them, and that actually allows people to get rid of their biases a little bit more, because you can't have people who say yeah, I don't think he's a really good culture fit, and you'd be like, but you scored him 20 out of 20 for the interview. They kind of have to confront their own biases in that scenario. So scoring can really help with consistency. Clear guidelines on how to probe in questions and follow up. That's kind of a training thing. If you've ever done an interview and you get a candidate that's really struggling to answer a question, it's kind of an art form to be able to pull out of them the answers that you're looking for. But that's something that you can train, and you can actually set out guidelines for each of your questions to make sure that that happens effectively. Everybody should be trained. That's a really, really important thing, and trained in a standardized way. And preferably, it is cross-disciplined. So, you should have people who are non-engineers doing culture interviews for your engineers. And you should have non-designers doing culture interviews for your designers. It really, really helps to kind of make sure that you're hiring a diverse group of people, and that you're not just hiring people that kind of are the same as the interviewers. So how do we come up with our core values? The process that we used was a day-long workshop. And from that workshop, we came up with the first draft. It was interdisciplinary. There was also multiple levels of seniority. We encouraged debate throughout the entire process, and it was really exhausting. It was something where people were heavily emotionally invested into the entire process. The things that I would really encourage you, if you're going to embark on some kind of visioning process for your core values, really make sure that it is interdisciplinary and that you have multiple levels of seniority. And that's really, really key to kind of capture what's going on within your organization. If you are like a young company, you're just starting out, it's easy enough to sort of set what you think those core values are, but once you start growing past the 15, 20 person mark, that's when you actually have to start asking people what they think the culture is, and getting a lot of different opinions. Again, we've won a bunch of culture awards built around a lot of this stuff. And I think that's a good way to look for companies that you want to admire. If you want to model off of, is you can look at other companies that have won culture awards, and that's a great way to find people to talk to. Or you can also send me a LinkedIn message if you want some more information. So what can you do? Don't use our core values. You should think deeply about what matters to your own culture. Make it public and transparent within your organization and talk about it, and don't be afraid to iterate. That's something that I've seen some studios fail at, is that they have their core values and that's their core values and they're never changing. But as your company grows, you need to be proactive in making sure that you talk to a lot of different people on the team to make sure that they actually reflect what it's like to work there. Use your values to try to guide all your decisions. It can really help people to try to understand how they act within the organization. So it's a useful tool for people if you do the right work and making sure that everybody is bought in. And then the final thing is, like, be authentic to what you actually think a good team should do, and spend the time to really organize your thoughts and write it down and test your knowledge against other people. So remember, the score takes care of itself if you do all of these things really, really well. And if you are interested in getting in touch with me, please reach out either on Twitter at TVTayber or LinkedIn. You can find me /TVTayber. And once again, we are hiring and for all roles. So save some time for questions. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm actually going to be a bit cheeky because we're running a bit behind, so
yeah,
we're going to skip on the questions this time. But I presume you're going to be around for people who want to talk.
I will be around out there, and you can come and grab me, and
that's great.
Have some questions.
Well, thank you very much.